Hello everybody. Next up, weather permitting, etc., we venture up to the northwest, where we'll be hosted by Manchester United in an FA Cup fifth round tie, shoehorned into midweek due to the condensation of the season. Kick-off on Tuesday night is 7:30pm, and the match is being shown on BBC One, meaning that pretty much anyone who wants to watch it can do so. If you can't be bothered to watch the tie, the gentleman from Eyes Up Mother Brown will watch it for you, at no additional cost to your TV licence fee. They're good like that. Manchester United have qualified for the fifth round by virtue of having won 2 home ties. Firstly, a 5th-minute McTominay header was enough to see off Watford in the third round. Then they got rid of Liverpool, 3-2 in the fourth round. Hilariously, and sadly predictably, the Liverpool echo is still whining about the winner. Fernandes scored direct from a free kick awarded for a foul on Cavani, which the Scousers continue to whine was a dive. Whether or not it was a dive, and Cavani did make the most of the challenge although there was contact, it's somewhat irrelevant, and it should be remembered that no club that's ever employed the likes of Salah, Mane, and going back a few years Gerrard, has any right whatsoever to complain about diving. Of course, that's not to let Manchester United off the hook. Their 9-0 win against Southampton was tainted by the spectre of Martial going horizontal to gain a penalty that should have been overturned by VAR. Perhaps it would have been had the decision been in the hands of 2 honest men with no hidden agendas. Historically up there, it's always been difficult to get the rub of the green with match officials. Our FA Cup visit there a few years ago saw Payet's sublime free kick countered by a late equaliser that shouldn't have required VAR to spot the Lofthouse-esque assault on Randolph that enabled its scoring. That was the match after which lives were put at risk by a combination of criminally inept planning by railway companies and disgraceful policing on the part of a number of different police forces, which resulted in thousands of supporters being crammed into far too small a space on the concourse at Manchester Piccadilly Station. Having been present for that particular fiasco, I can vouch for the moronic actions of some of the police involved to the extent that I've altered my travel plans to that particular venue for subsequent visits, just to avoid pinch points that might be under the control of those police forces. Of course, the crowd for this match will be nil, but I'd still be concerned that the number might be too much for the combined brains of British Transport, Greater Manchester, Merseyside and South Yorkshire police forces that were on duty that day. Transfer-wise, there's not much to keep Daisy, the socially distanced, support-bubbling personal assistant with a beautiful smile, out of the hot tub this week. The one permanent deal signed in the recent winter window is a bit interesting, though. They brought in a kid in the form of 18-year-old winger Amad Diallo. Or is that Diallo? There's something a bit not right about that deal. My suspicions were first aroused when Daisy mentioned the fee of €25 million, rising to €40 million with add-ons. That's about £22 to £35 million in real money. A hell of a lot for someone with a handful of appearances for Atalanta under his belt. A further rat was nasally detected when it transpired that Diallo and his elder by 2-year brother Hamad had left their native Ivory Coast when he was about 10. Both players went under the surname Traore back then, which, suspiciously, was the surname of the chap that they travelled with, called Hamad Sr. Hamad Sr. claimed to be the boy's dad, but investigations suggested that he was a distant relative of Diallo's at best, and that Hamad Jr. wasn't even Diallo's brother, the deception being designed to make easier immigration status in Italy. Those suspicions seemed to be borne out when, at the age of 18, Diallo got himself a shiny new Italian passport, having had his name legally changed back to Diallo from Traore. Interestingly, Diallo's brother, who's currently on loan from Empoli to Phil Collins' Prince Sound-alike club Sassuolo, hasn't changed his name. Manchester United's last outing, in which they blew 2-0 and 3-2 leads to draw 3-3 at home to Everton, saw them lose perma-sulk Paul Pogba to a thigh injury, which looks likely to rule him out of the tie, alongside Eric Bailly and long-term injury Phil Jones. Other than that, it's a full squad, though expect a bit of rotation from Saturday's starting 11, mainly because they can. I'll move straight on to us. The wild and wacky world of association football couldn't wait for the next match, as there's a lot to say about our last game. Let's get the game itself out of the way first. It looked a game too much over the past few weeks for some of our players. Too many looked leggy against a Fulham team who were organised enough to take advantage of our lack of pace and guile. Not that they really looked like winning themselves, despite having the better of the attacking play. The worrying thing was the substitution of Antonio in the second half. He didn't pull up sharply in the time-honoured hamstring style, but he did give up on the sort of ball into a channel that he would normally relish, the substitution coming immediately after that. A second or so earlier he'd been rubbing his thigh. Now it may well be that the player's suffering from little more than fatigue, as has been suggested, that being the lot of the lone striker. However, if it does transpire that there is a troublesome hamstring involved, it does throw into sharp relief the lack of wisdom involved in selling a striker without having a replacement lined up. OK, let's look at the game's only real talking point, the appalling decision to dismiss Souček. Firstly, let's nail the myth that's been doing the rounds that Dean wasn't aware of the coming together until he had it brought to his attention by his fellow Lee Mason. Mitrovic, who ought to be looking at retrospective action but won't be, went down and the whistle went immediately. At that point, one suspects that Dean felt that even he couldn't do more than have a quiet word. Enter Mason with his, "Look, his fist is clenched," hallucination. That was enough for Dean to take centre stage. Over to the screen he went, almost certainly having made up his mind to grab the chance to add another chapter to the lucrative book that no doubt he has lined up to have written for him once he retires. Of course, even though he knew what he was about to do, he was also unable to resist the opportunity to take up some valuable screen time by watching a dozen replays of something that an honest man could have sorted out within seconds. The dismissal was for violent conduct. The use of the word violent implies a state of mind on the part of the perpetrator. There has to be a deliberate element to the deed. By definition, it's difficult to justify an accident as being violent conduct. There's not a person in this land who believes that the incident represented violent conduct, which leaves us with two possibilities. Either Dean thought it was deliberate, in which case he's got no business being anywhere near a professional football match, or he thought it was accidental, in which case he has no business being anywhere near a professional football match. A trawl through old match reports shows that Dean's practice of deliberately ignoring the laws of the game, particularly when it's a live TV game, has been going on since at least 2003 and probably even before that. Everybody within the game is aware of his arrogance and his contempt for players. Remember, this is the moron who apparently threatened Pedro Obiang with a red card for looking at him. It's not like people can be unaware of how he operates. When Faguli's red card got overturned a few years back, it was the fifth red card in the official's previous six that had been overturned on appeal. That stat alone should have rung alarm bells somewhere. Instead, PGMOL has protected Dean to the extent he's now able to do what he wants, whenever he wants, without fear of punishment. If PGMOL had any interest in improving the abysmal standards of refereeing in this country, they would have given Dean a written warning as to his conduct many years ago and sacked him when he failed to behave. The fact that they didn't speaks volumes. When they interviewed David Moyes, he was pessimistic about the prospect of an appeal. He is, of course, right. The authorities do have a habit on these occasions of crawling over broken glass to prove black is white to defend the indefensible. Witness an FA spokesman quoting a rule that doesn't exist to defend the lack of retrospective action on one of Mo Salah's dives a few years ago. However, in this case, we would have been doing football a disservice were we not to have appealed. In fact, we shouldn't have had to appeal. David Moyes should be the first call anyone at the FA makes on Monday morning. It was noted that Southampton have requested never to see Dean and Mason again. Whilst that request has no official standing, we must add our names to that list as soon as possible. PGMOL must be left in no doubt that its defence of Dean and Mason is as unacceptable as their actions were in the first place. Dean has been allowed to get away with what he's doing for far too long, and if anyone's serious about keeping the game free of match fixing and betting-based corruption, preventing the sort of conditions that would allow bent officials to flout the laws on a whim without fear of meaningful scrutiny is a must. On the absence front for this week's match, I'm going to assume for the time being that Souček's appeal will be successful. This leaves us with just Arthur and Randolph injured, and of course Lingard will be cup-tied out of contention. We do have the weekend off after this one before going on to try and push a nail or two into the Sheffield United coffin, so I would hope that we would field the strongest 11 available to us. Too many of our usual bench start the game and will effectively be conceding the tie. For that reason, my prediction for this week will be heavily caveated. With the first 11 or thereabouts out, I would plump for a draw, but given the fact we've got to factor in an additional potential 30 minutes, I've got a feeling this match will be decided by kicks from the penalty mark, as the old version of the laws of the game used to describe them, back in the days when referees weren't allowed to treat the laws of the game as an optional extra. So let's put the £2.50 I was going to send to a bioterrorist to infect Mike Dean with a virulent strain of athlete's foot on a 2-2 draw after extra time, and let's say the Irons will progress to the next round on those kicks from the penalty mark. Enjoy the game.